traffic. Wolfe is looking to both repeat his regional success this year and from last year here in Orlando in this Orlando 2024 Regionals Finals. Neil Patel is standing in his way. Turn 1 of Game 1, we see the face down of the Incineroar with the Ogerpon for Neil and the Amoonguss for Wolfe.
There may be the GOATs of this tournament competing on stage right now, but it is the Incineroars that start off this match. Trading intimidates. That Amoonguss for Wolfe is in a tough spot as it has to worry about that big damage from the Ogerpon and potentially a flinch as well from Neil's Incineroar.
Neil's own Incineroar also carrying the safety goggles, so a really rough spot to be in if you are this Amoonguss. Notably, we saw Wolfe's Intimidate Incineroar activate first before Neil's, so indicates that it is either a speed tie, which we can't know, or Wolfe's is just trained to be a little bit faster. Good info for both of these players going forward, because if you're Neil, you at least know that you are not guaranteed to be faster than Wolfe's Incineroar.
Incineroar on Neil's side of the field going to sit back for a bit as the Urshifu is the Pokemon that takes its place. Spiky Shield onto that Ogerpon means it won't be taking any damage from the Sludge Bomb from Wolfe's Amoonguss.
A nice switch there, the Urshifu coming in favor of the Incineroar. Very unlikely for a Spore to be hitting that slot because of the safety goggles on that Incineroar, and now Urshifu threatens some big damage into the Incineroar on Wolfe's end. If Neil was to terrestrialize his Ogerpon, get that attack boost, return to neutral, and Ivy Cudgel most likely threatens a one-hit KO on Amoonguss, which would in turn allow Urshifu to attack Incineroar on the same turn. So now Wolfe has to be very wary of that play, possibly respond with a terrestrialization of his own, or even some pivoting with his own Pokemon.
I was just going to say, we've seen Wolfe approach his games throughout the weekend with very defensive choices for his terrestrializations. We've seen the Amoonguss terrestrialize into the water type. We've seen the Incineroar terrestrialize into the grass type. Both of those would have been a smart play here for Wolfe, but he is going to start this turn off with the Urshifu, his own Rapid Strike Urshifu, taking the field, and then a combo play with the water type terrestrialization on the Amoonguss.
Really smart defensive play there. This allows Wolfe the flexibility to move some of his Pokemon around, keep this Amoonguss on the field without at risk of it being KO'd by a big Fire-type Ivy Cudgel, but Focus Energy immediately coming through, boosting the critical hit rate of this Ogerpon, making it even more likely for critical hits from that Ivy Cudgel. Surging Strikes comes through into Wolfe's Urshifu. Resist it, luckily, will not be taking too much damage, and this Amoonguss will have the chance to possibly go for a Spore into Urshifu.
Amoonguss will also have the opportunity to go on the offense here if Wolfe wanted to play like the previous turn, but actually anticipated the Ogerpon's terrestrialization. But because Ogerpon is still a grass fire type Pokemon, that Spore failed.
The Spore fails, and more importantly, the Urshifu on Wolfe's end does not threaten super effective damage with Surging Strikes. Now this Ogerpon on Neil's end is a big threat. I believe a 50% chance to score a critical hit with Ivy Cudgel after that Focus Energy, which can negate any kind of Intimidate boost that we're seeing from the Incineroar. That's now -2, but it doesn't matter at all unless it gets a critical hit.
Well, Grassy Glide is not very effective, but it does get that critical hit onto the Incineroar. But the 1-2 combo Surging Strikes will be more than enough damage to remove that Pokemon from play. Amoonguss does get the opportunity to do something again this turn, but what did Wolfe pick? He goes for the Sludge Bomb. It will target down that Ogerpon and bring it down to below half its health and gets poisoned as well. So some good damage over time for Wolfe, but it looks like it's going to be 3 or 4 turns before the poison alone would knock out that Pokemon.
That's a pretty critical poison from the Sludge Bomb. It now means that if Wolfe brings in the Urshifu, he might have the opportunity to KO it with an Aqua Jet before the Ogerpon can go for a Grassy Glide. Of course, the Rillaboom switching in for Neil would empower the Grassy Glide to be a priority move instead of just neutral speed, but because the Urshifu is holding a Choice Scarf, Aqua Jet would still act before the Grassy Glide and possibly have a chance to KO it. We do, however, see Neil actually does not have the Rillaboom. It's going to be that Chien Pao, so there's no chance for a priority Grassy Glide for this game, which means Urshifu on Wolfe's side should attack first.
It should attack first, but what target will Wolfe pick? Will he use the Amoonguss's more offensive capabilities once again, or will he try and finally align a Spore into the Urshifu, or dare I say, into the Incineroar, as Neil will switch in that Pokemon. bring back the Intimidate onto the opposing Urshifu and try and give this Ogerpon the best possible chance to hold on, but it's actually just a Choice Scarf Surging Strikes. More than enough damage to pick up the KO there, and now Amoonguss, the last Pokemon to move once again for Wolf, will not be able to put that Incineroar to sleep thanks to the safety goggles.
And now this is actually a much better spot for Wolf. Look at this Water-type Amoonguss. There is not much left on Neil's side that can threaten big damage into it. Urshifu now has the option for a neutral close combat, which is nice, especially if you do consider the possibility of the Sword of Ruin boost from that Chien-Pao in the back. But Incineroar cannot do big damage. Again, it's not even packing Flare Blitz, but Knockoff won't do a ton to this Amoonguss thanks to it being so bulky. And now the Urshifu on Wolf's end, also not heavily threatened by much. There's nothing that can hit it for more than neutral damage right now left on Neil's team.
I do wonder if Neil were to try and connect Knockoff with that Urshifu to remove the Choice Scarf, if that could be something to come in handy for him. That would also mean that the Chien-Pao, I think, would have a favorable speed alignment against Wolf's Urshifu in the end game. You also have to wonder what Wolf's final Pokemon is. You don't have to wonder for much longer, as Wolf will switch out the Urshifu into the Landorus. So once again, saving that Landorus Incarnate for the back, Neil finally opting to use that Terrestrialization.
Terrestrialization comes through on the Incineroar, will make it a Ghost type, so much easier to stand up to both the Urshifu and the Landorus on Wolf's side of the field, but unfortunately won't do much for him on this turn specifically, as Wolf did opt to switch out the Urshifu.
Fake Out will flinch the Amoonguss, and close combat will be resisted by the Landorus. That was a great call there from Wolf. Urshifu's lower defenses as well will also mean that both of his Pokemon have a better chance of dealing that critical damage he needs.
Now that this Landorus has come in on that close combat too, and Earth Power almost definitely will KO this Urshifu, so you have to worry about that if you're Neil. Your Chien-Pao in the back really doesn't want to be switching in either, because breaking that Focus Sash means that Urshifu on Wolf's side can come in and just KO it at any time. Again, this Incineroar cannot be redirected by Amoonguss because of those safety goggles, but you do have to worry about taking a big Earth Power.
You have to worry about taking an Earth Power, which is why Chien-Pao is going to take the field. Sword of Ruin will only be boosting the Urshifu's attack power here. Rage Powder means that the Urshifu will be targeting down the Amoonguss with an Aqua Jet. Even with the Sword of Ruin, it's not any damage, and Earth Power takes that Chien-Pao immediately down to the Focus Sash.
I really like the Earth Power going into that slot too. You're tempted to KO the Urshifu there, but getting important damage on that Incineroar, or in this case, bringing Chien-Pao down to just 1 HP remaining, is really, really big for Wolf. It's huge for that Incineroar Wolf has in the, not Incineroar, Urshifu Wolf has in the back, because when I keep saying Incineroar, when Urshifu comes back in, it has the option to go straight for that Choice Scarf Aqua Jet. There is no way that Neil has to redirect that Aqua Jet away or prevent it thanks to the Unseen Fist. Big, big damage into Chien-Pao here.
You also have to wonder if Neil's choice of not having a Flare Blitz on that Incineroar will ultimately hurt him. For now, though, we do see a Rage Powder redirecting Sacred Sword, will be activating the Citrus Berry onto the Amoonguss, bringing it up to above half its health. A second Earth Power from this Landorus will not connect with the Urshifu, and Amoonguss finally has a chance to consider, do I keep redirecting here and try and let Landorus clean up, or do I try and anticipate a switch in? There still is the Incineroar in the back for Neil.
There is, but I think if you're Amoonguss here, your main job right now is to protect Landorus from that Ice Spinner from the Chien-Pao. Landorus is a really, really scary threat for Wolf right now, and this Amoonguss is not taking much damage at all from any of these attacks, especially considering Chien-Pao cannot use any of its same type attack bonus attacks for neutral damage into an Amoonguss if it goes for Rage Powder.
Incineroar will take the field once again for Neil. Chien-Pao down to a single HP of health. Sacred Sword will find its target into the Amoonguss. Earth Power into the Incineroar to drop it below half its health. And here comes that Sludge Bomb, finally connecting with the Chien-Pao for the KO.
Really love that play from Wolf. That is a big risk, because if Chien-Pao goes for Ice Spinner on that turn, Landorus just gets knocked out, and Neil probably wins the game immediately. But knowing that Neil has to get rid of that Amoonguss Amoonguss probably opted to go for Sacred Sword. He opts not to go for Rage Powder, which allows him to get huge damage into Incineroar and knock out that Amoonguss, not the Chien-Pao with Amoonguss. Now Fake Out is on the field. He cannot possibly ever Fake Out this Urshifu that is in the back for Wolf. That's really big because now, even though this Landorus can possibly get hit by something like an Aqua Jet or Surging Strikes from Urshifu on this turn, on the prior turns, on the later turns rather, Urshifu can come back in for Wolf, not have to worry about getting faked out, and all of its attacks will land.
There is also a Protect available to the Amoonguss and the Landorus as well here. Do have to play carefully around the Unseen Fist ability from Urshifu, as that will allow it to deal damage through that Protect. But if Wolf is feeling confident, you can try and anticipate where the Fake Out would go. Instead, Fake Out is allowed to connect with that Landorus, close combat into the Amoonguss to knock it out. Both these trainers down to their final 2 Pokemon in game number 1.
Only 2 Pokemon remaining for both. Now this Urshifu on Neil's side is down to -1 defense and special defense. Could come in very handy for Wolf, who will have to lock his Urshifu into its final attack of the game on this turn. Urshifu now at pretty good health remaining. 1 close combat from Neil's own Urshifu might be enough, but at the same time, you possibly have the option to go for your own close combat, take advantage of that -1 defense. But Aqua Jet comes through first, KOs Wolf's Landorus.
Landorus is down. Urshifu is Wolf's final Pokemon in this game number 1. Tries to use Surging Strikes to pick up the knockout on this Ghost-type Incineroar. It will take all 3 hits, but it is now just Urshifu remaining for both these Pokemon trainers.
You have to wonder, I don't think Wolf's Urshifu has enough firepower left here. There is no Intimidate on Neil's Urshifu. It is at full attack, and even though it is at -1 defense, it still is resisting the Surging Strikes that Wolf had to lock into, because if it locked into close combat, he would have had no way to damage the Incineroar.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Wolf, you can see just how much damage the Surging Strikes will do here. It's possible, depending on how his Urshifu is trained, that there might be 1 more turn left in this game. But even with additional defense drops...
But he has Aqua Jet!
He has Aqua Jet!
Oh, it's not enough. Close combat, not enough to KO Urshifu, but unfortunately for Wolf, Neil is not running Choice Scarf Urshifu. He has the option to switch up his attacks, and Aqua Jet here is enough to get Neil game 1 of this finals match here in Orlando, Florida.
Coming down once again to the wire for both of these Pokemon trainers. Neil staying calm, cool, and collected and finding that win condition, really in thanks to the flexibility that Mystic Water gives him on that Urshifu. You could see Wolf pivot out that his own Urshifu, trying to ensure that he can make a correct choice when it comes to the point when you have to pick that final move to lock into. But because he was unable to match the priority of that Aqua Jet, just his Pokemon taken down.
It really was the fact that Neil had the option to switch moves there. We saw it go for a big close combat to KO the Amoonguss on Wolf's side of the field, which allowed for no more Spores to be thrown out, no more Sludge Bombs to get some more chip damage, and of course the Aqua Jet came through that KO'd the Landorus. The flexibility of that Mystic Water, and of course the power boost from Mystic Water as well, powering up the Aqua Jet, which could have been a difference maker in KOing that Landorus at the very end of that game.
Yeah, and even though there was a little bit of luck on Wolf's side, you know, we saw that poison come through from the Sludge Bomb. It just could not match the momentum that Neil had. And I think going into game number 2, I do wonder how Wolf is going to switch things up a bit. I feel like he does have to bring his Urshifu regardless, because it does match up so well against the Incineroar, against that Ogerpon. Really forces terrestrializations in those situations. But it struggled to find purchase throughout the rest of the match otherwise.
It did, even with this great play Wolf made, predicting the Sacred Sword coming out from Chien-Pao to KO it with the Sludge Bomb Amoonguss. It ended up not being enough just because the Urshifu on Neil's side had the power to go for that close combat. Neil had the Fake Out on deck just in time to prevent Landorus from going for the big Earth Power to KO that Urshifu, and of course Unseen Fist made it so difficult for Wolf to pivot around.
A big adjustment from Wolf as we jump straight into game number 2. It's going to be the Landorus Incarnate and Incineroar lead for him against the Ogerpon and Incineroar once again for Neil.
really like this adjustment. This Landorus is now facing, a fire type and a fire type, both of which really don't want to be taking the earth powers. Of course, you do have the grass typing to make sure that earth power is not super effective, and then you have to worry about Sludge Bomb instead. And again, like we saw earlier on in this match, we are pretty sure that Wolfe's Incineroar is likely faster than Neil's, just based on how the Intimidates are playing out. We did see Wolfe's Intimidate go first in both of these games, so fake out advantage to Wolfe. But of course, if you choose to fake out the Incineroar on Neil's side of the field, you still have to worry about that Ogre Pond.
You do, and just seeing how game number 1 played out, I don't know if you can necessarily risk getting so much damage down onto your Landorus Incarnate in turn 1 of this game. You probably want to try and match the fake out pressure of your own Pokemon, but we do get a turn 1 Terastallization from Neil, going straight for that Hearth Flame Mask and Body Aspect activation to boost up Ogerpon's attack to negate the attack drop from Intimidate.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice little reset there from Neil. Fake out goes into his own Incineroar, which flinches next. Ivy Cudgel coming out. This is a neutral Terrafire boosted Ivy Cudgel into the Landorus on Wolfe's end.
And Landorus is able to take that attack and fire back an Earth Power. That's now super effective. Gets the one-hit KO in return.
Great turn of events there for Wolfe. That is Terastallization immediately gone for Neil. It was such a big part of that first game, which forced Wolfe not to lock into close combat because the Incineroar was a ghost type. But that is now just gone. The Ogerpon itself is gone, a huge source of damage, and now Wolfe has an immediate 4-3 Pokemon advantage. Urshifu coming in here actually in a very good spot, thanks to the lower health on Landorus. Obviously, a huge threat always into Incineroar, but you cannot discount the huge advantage Wolfe just gave himself with that turn 1, making sure your Landorus is protected from a fake out from Neil's own Incineroar and getting that huge Earth Power KO.
Recognizing the importance of this Landorus in this matchup, Wolfe switches it out to send in his own Urshifu. It's actually a double switch, going to send in the Amoonguss, who can take those water type attacks from the Urshifu so much more comfortably.
It's very comfortable, especially considering there is no Flare Blitz on Neil's Incineroar. The Amoonguss switch here is very hard to punish because there's no way you have to KO it on this turn. Surging Strikes come through, 3 hits into Amoonguss. Luckily for Neil is not that Rocky Helmet set, but he does knock off Wolfe's Incineroar's Choice Scarf, which I think in this scenario, actually not that bad. You give yourself the option to switch up your moves.
Yeah, I was going to say, going back to game number 1, it was ultimately the fact that the Urshifu was locked into an attack that gave Neil the advantage. That is no longer a restriction for Wolfe. Yes, it is going to be naturally a bit slower now because you don't benefit from the speed boost, but it is still a bit more flexible, which is going to be so important, especially knowing that Neil's last Pokemon this time is Rillaboom.
Rillaboom now hits the field, sets up the grassy terrain, and is threatening some big damage into Urshifu, but a big close combat straight into that Rillaboom slot from Wolfe's Urshifu. That is over half of Rillaboom's HP immediately gone. And
with a Sludge Bomb too! That's enough to pick up the KO on that Rillaboom on the switch. That was a fantastic prediction from Wolfe.
It's so hard to punish that too. Close combat does a huge amount of damage to that Incineroar, and really nothing in the back from Neil wants to take the combination of those two attacks. Wolfe very smartly going for that double target, knowing that Amoonguss is really not threatened by anything at this point, because I cannot reiterate enough the importance of Neil's Incineroar not carrying Flare Blitz. This Amoonguss is in such a great spot right now, especially considering there's no more option for Neil to switch. If Urshifu gets put to sleep, it can't swap out, try to get something more productive onto the field. This is a big 180 for Wolfe here in this second game.
And in recognition of that fact, I think Neil actually just locked in a forfeit in this game number 2. Wolfe has all 4 Pokemon of his remaining, and even though Neil arguably has one of the best attackers on his team available to him, that Urshifu with the Mystic Water is not powerful enough to power through the Amoonguss on its own. And just like that, we're heading into a game 3 in this finals.
We are. Frankly, that Amoonguss was going nowhere for the rest of this game. It still had its Citrus Berry, it had the Grassy Terrain Recovery, it had Regenerator, all available to it, and at the same time, it could redirect really anything from that Urshifu until Wolfe was able to get something onto the field to KO it. Really, really well played game from Wolfe there. The Ivy Cudgel not scoring a critical hit here, really a difference maker because we did not have that focus energy boost just yet. It was still that slightly raised chance, but not very raised, and a big Earth Power KO in return. Kind of the terrestrialization there coming around to bite Neil, because if it was not terrestrialized, probably able to survive one Earth Power, just maybe.
For sure, yeah.
So really big swing there that Neil took, but it unfortunately did not pay off.
And talk about big swings. I mean, Wolfe doubled into that slot.
Yeah.
Anticipating not just the Rillaboom making an appearance there, that's a Pokemon adjustment, but also optimizing for the damage in that position as well. That was such an incredible read from Wolfe, as really there was no indication at that point in the game that it was that Rillaboom that was present in the back of Neil's party.
There wasn't, but even if you think about the Pokemon Neil brought to the first game, if the Chien-Pao switches in there instead, for example, it gets immediately taken down to Focus Sash and then KO'd there. So a really smart double up, really just guaranteeing damage. Obviously the Urshifu will attack through Protect regardless, but Amoonguss cannot. So if you want to double target a slot, you double target the one that cannot protect, cannot terrestrialize, cannot avoid damage, just like Wolfe did there.
All right, well, these trainers are ready to go into game number 3. Let's make some noise. Let's get the hype going, as it's Amoonguss and Incineroar on the field for Wolfe against the Ogerpon and the Rillaboom for Neil.
I think immediate advantage to Wolfe here, just because you get a crucial Intimidate down onto Ogerpon and Rillaboom right off the bat, starting off the game at -1 attack. Neil now actually is the one with the fake out advantage though, because Rillaboom should be faster than this Incineroar, will have the option to dictate which of Wolfe's Pokemon possibly flinch from fake out. And of course the Rillaboom, the Ogerpon on Neil's side, not very heavily threatened by anything right now, could possibly take the chance to go straight for that focus energy.
And I think getting that focus energy in early would also mean that the Ogerpon is more likely to score those critical hits, and really puts a lot of pressure on Wolfe from a board position as well, because if you know that your opponent has essentially a coin flip to deal a massive amount of damage to avoid any stat drops, to just play around those complications, you definitely don't want them to take that. But we see a Pokemon adjustment from Wolfe. Tornadus will take the field, will lose its Focus Sash for its trouble, but seeing that Ogerpon went for a Focus Energy with the Sludge Bomb and the Poison, that's the best you could hope for from that turn for Wolfe.
100%, Gabby. That is a massive switch there. Wolfe has not brought Tornadus to either of these first 2 games, and it pays off immediately. Neil leading the 2 Grass-type Pokemon on his team is the perfect situation you want to find your Tornadus in. Now you have the option to go for a possible Tailwind, set your Pokemon up for a speed advantage later on. Even a Bleak Wind Storm here would be really, really good. This Ogerpon is now at the boosted critical hit rate from Focus Energy, but it is still only a 50% chance to score a critical hit. So it's not guaranteed that that Focus Energy will pay off, especially because the Sludge Bomb came through, dealt a ton of damage, and crucially put this Ogerpon on a timer.
Some people may also be wondering if Wolfe is considering a Rain Dance on that Tornadus to try and weaken the Fire-type attacks from that Ogerpon, but without confirmation about whether or not Neil's owner Shifu is on the field just yet. That is too risky of a play to make. Bleak Wind Storm will not connect with the Rillaboom nor the Ogerpon. Woodhammer, though, into the Tornadus for a good amount of damage. Now this Amoonguss' Sludge Bomb will not connect with the Spiky Shield on the Ogerpon.
You have to respect the double into that slot if you're Wolfe. You know, if you're using Bleak Wind Storm, it comes with the possible chance of missing like we did just see. And you cover for a Bleak Wind Storm missing Ogerpon there. Unfortunately, you can't cover for missing the Rillaboom in that scenario, which does get some decent damage into Tornadus. But thankfully, Tornadus should still have the option to go for one final attack if it chooses to. The Tailwind with the Prankster ability will act first. And the Grassy Glide from Ogerpon on Neil's side might try to go first, but without enough damage to KO it, it will not go down even with the critical hit.
That Tornadus is unfortunately unable to go for a Bleak Wind Storm this turn, as it will be taken down by those 2 priority Grassy Glides. But you traded your speed control Pokemon to knock out that critical hit boosted Ogerpon. I think that's the best trade that Wolfe could get in this situation.
Not a bad trade at all. Seeing Neil's last 2 Pokemon, it will be the Urshifu and the Chien-Pao. And considering Neil only has 3 physical attackers remaining, the Incineroar on Wolfe's side will be very important for the rest of this match. Rillaboom and Chien-Pao, again, both physical attackers. Rillaboom now down to -2 attack from that first Intimidate, and Chien-Pao at -1. The Amoonguss on Wolf's side here, we saw it be so important against the Chien-Pao earlier on in this match, especially if you do opt for the Water Terrestrialization, which would be very handy coming in against this Chien-Pao. However, you do still have to worry about the Rillaboom's Grass-type attacks.
Sacred Sword from Chien-Pao into the opposing Incineroar to drop it down to below half its health, but the combination with the high horsepower, Incineroar is able to hold on. Flare Blitz is a one-hit knockout on that Rillaboom. Wolf will lose the Incineroar with recoil damage as a result, but talk about a great trade. Now this Amoonguss is free to terrestrialize, and he gets a Spore in as well!
I'm 100% okay taking that trade if I am Wolf. That is a massive survival from the Sacred Sword and the high horsepower combination, and of course, a huge one-hit KO into that Rillaboom. Now Neil and Wolf are both down to their final 2 Pokemon, but Landorus coming in. There is nothing that can protect this Urshifu from a possible Earth power. Landorus is a very, very strong Pokemon, and unless Urshifu is trained to be incredibly specially bulky, a combination of Rage Powder to prevent an Aqua Jet into that Landorus slot and an Earth Power could be enough straight up for a KO here.
Both these trainers are down to their final 2 Pokemon, and remember, the title of a regional champion is on the line, and that's why you see Neil playing to every possible out, will go for that stellar terrestrialization to boost the power of Chien-Pao's attacks once it wakes up from its sleep.
You have to wonder why Neil opted for the terrestrialization there. This Chien-Pao cannot possibly wake up on this turn, Gabby. There's no way this Chien-Pao attacks, and this terrestrialization cannot come in handy for at least one more turn. Landorus instead going immediately for a terrestrialization of its own to protect itself from a possible Aqua Jet coming out from this Urshifu. Earth Power into Chien-Pao brings it down to its Focus Sash.
Chien-Pao barely able to hang on. Urshifu surging strikes into the Landorus with the terrestrialization. It's going to be enough to knock it out.
It's enough for a KO into Landorus, but I think that's all Wolf needs was that Earth Power into Chien-Pao. Really smart targeting there, because if Sludge Bomb comes through to KO this Chien-Pao, it will be a 1v1 Urshifu versus Amoonguss, and that is exactly what Wolf wants.
Amoonguss is not the most offensive Pokemon that you would think of in the Regulation F metagame, but it is the Pokemon that's carrying Wolfe Glick's hopes and dreams of a repeat regional win in this season. Urshifu on the other side of the field, the Pokemon you think of for Regulation F and VGC, trying to find an opportunity, find the damage it needs to take this Amoonguss down.
I really just want to call out how smart that terrestrialization from Landorus was for Wolf on that prior turn. Doing that means that it drops the water type weakness. Even though we saw it get knocked out by Surging Strikes anyway, it couldn't possibly be knocked out by Aqua Jet. All Wolf needed was one Earth Power into the Chien-Pao, which could not wake up, could not protect. It's guaranteed damage. The combination from that and Earth Power and Sludge Bomb from the Amoonguss enough to KO it. And Wolf very confident, just like we are, Gabby, that I think this Amoonguss can 1v1 the Urshifu, especially considering it just got put to sleep. It's got to take a couple turns to wake up, and this Amoonguss still has the Citrus Berry at its disposal.
It still has the Citrus Berry, and it is running Sludge Bomb, which looks like it will be about a 3 to 4 hit KO, depending on how much damage it does. We see the Urshifu wake up after a single turn of sleep. Will activate the Citrus Berry on this Amoonguss, but I think the most important thing to look for here is just when will that Amoonguss be in close combat range, as the odds that Wolf went for a Spore this turn are so low.
They really are. Sludge Bomb comes through, and I think the worst thing that can happen is a Poison here for Wolf, because you really want to put it back to sleep this turn. If it was Poison, that is not an option. Surging Strikes comes back through here from this Urshifu, will attempt to put Amoonguss in close combat range. Gabby, like you called out, close combat, despite the critical hits from Surging Strikes, is slightly stronger at the end of the day.
It looks like both these trainers have heads up, waiting to see how this game will play out. I think this is one of those situations where Neil knows that he has to keep clicking Surging Strikes until it's close combat range. Wolf knows that he needs maybe 2 more Sludge Bombs to knock out this Pokemon. Here comes the first one, 6 HP. We saw it wake up after after one turn earlier. Will it wake up again? This is the turn that will decide your Orlando Regional Champion, and it is the Urshifu close combat instead of Amoonguss. It holds on! It holds on through that attack. Amoonguss should have plenty of time to return and knock out with that sludge bomb, and Wolfe Glick is now your 2023 and 2024 Orlando Regional Champion.
What an insane end game there, Gabby. Wolfe played that so incredibly well, just knowing how exactly he needed to target his attacks, getting the Earth Power Sludge Bomb KO on Qian Pao as much as he needed to get that Amoonguss Urshifu endgame. Played it so perfectly well, and Neil, even with the 2 one-turn sleeps, the minimum possible sleep length, twice in a row in that endgame,